I hired a woman to clean the house while my entire family was out. About an hour later, she called me and whispered, "Ma'am, is there anyone else in the house?" I froze. "No, why do you ask?" "There's a woman upstairs." I started trembling. "Get out of there right now." I called the police and drove home at top speed. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of vengeance from. I want to know how far it has traveled. That day I woke up with a plan to clean the house myself. I wanted everything to be spotless, especially before the coastal rains returned, when the humidity makes everything feel heavier and dirtier. I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a rag, and stood in front of the living room window, ready to start with enthusiasm. As I wiped the glass, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I looked at the screen. It was Yvette, my childhood friend, whom I hadn't seen in many years. Her cheerful voice filled the phone, letting me know she would only be passing through Savannah, Georgia for one day, and wanted to invite me for coffee. My heart warmed hearing her familiar voice. Yvette and I shared so many memories, running through the fields, staying up late, talking about our dreams. How could I say no? But thinking about all the cleaning I had to do, I hesitated for a moment. I couldn't leave the house like that. Then I remembered Brianna Parrish, the 20-something woman who lived in the alley near my place. She was slight, kind-natured, and needed some extra work to pay for her college classes. I called her, and she immediately accepted, grateful for the opportunity. I gave her precise instructions: clean the study, scrub the stairs to the second floor, and above all, be careful with the old, dusty shelves belonging to my husband, Jerome. I left her a spare key and asked her to lock up tight when she finished. I drove to the Magnolia Tree Cafe, where Yvette was waiting for me. We sat under a sprawling live oak tree. She told me about her life in the city, about her children who were already grown. I told her about Jerome, his work as a published novelist, and my tranquil, though sometimes empty days. We laughed, remembering old times. In the middle of our chat, my phone rang again. I saw the number. It was Brianna. I smiled, thinking she was calling to say she was finished, but when I answered, I didn't hear her usual shy voice. Instead, I heard agitated breathing, as if she was trying to contain a panic. "Miss Simone," she whispered, in a shaky voice I could barely hear, "is there anyone else in the house?" My heart stopped. "No," I replied, trying to sound calm. "I'm having coffee. My husband is at the publisher's and won't be back until tonight. What's going on, Brianna?" There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. I could only hear her ragged breathing. Suddenly, her voice broke. "There's a woman on the second floor. I was cleaning the stairs, and I saw her. She was wearing a long white dress with messy hair. She walked down the hallway and disappeared into the last room." Her words were like an ice-cold knife in my chest. I tried to stay calm, but the hand holding the phone was shaking. My first thought was that someone had broken in. The house was over 70 years old, but we always locked everything carefully. How could someone have entered? I apologized to Yvette, telling her I had an emergency. She looked at me worried, but I just shook my head, unable to explain more. I told Brianna on the phone, "Brianna, get out right now, lock the door and wait outside. I'm on my way." I called the police while driving, my voice cracking with anxiety. I explained there was an intruder in the house, trying to provide details even though my mind was a whirlwind. I tried to call Brianna again, but she didn't answer. Every unanswered ring made my heart pound harder, as if it were trying to escape my chest. I imagined the worst, that something had happened to her, or that the intruder had attacked her. That day, the streets of Savannah seemed endless, even though I was flooring the accelerator. When I arrived home, a police cruiser was already parked in front of the door. Brianna was sitting hunched on the front step, her face pale, her eyes wide open, filled with terror. I rushed toward her, hugged her, and asked anxiously, "Are you okay? Did you see anything else?" Brianna just shook her head, her lips pressed together, as if she couldn't utter a single word. Two police officers, one middle-aged with a serious look, and a younger one, walked out of the house. They said they had checked every corner, every room, every closet, under the beds, even the backyard shed. There was no one. There were no signs of forced entry. All doors and windows were locked, without a single scratch or strange mark. I sighed with relief, but the feeling of uneasiness didn't leave me. Brianna recounted, still trembling. "I swear I saw her, Miss Simone. She didn't look real. She was like a shadow. I won't dare go up to the second floor again." I stroked her shoulder to console her, but a doubt began to grow inside me. This house was over 70 years old. It had belonged to Jerome's family before we moved in. The brick walls, the creaking wooden doors, the dark corners, they had always made me feel like they were hiding something, but I couldn't imagine a woman. Just then, I heard Jerome's sedan pull up the cobblestone driveway in front of the house. He got out, his face surprised to see the police car and me next to Brianna. I took his arm and quickly told him what happened. I expected him to be as worried as I was, to want to find out what was going on, but Jerome only smiled faintly, a smile I rarely saw. He approached Brianna, patted her shoulder, and said in a soft, almost mocking voice, "You must have been tired, honey, and confused the sun's reflection with a shadow. Our house is old. It has many corners that play tricks on the eyes." Brianna lowered her head without saying another word. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I knew she wasn't a fanciful girl. She was hard-working, honest. She had no reason to invent something like this. But Jerome's gaze, his calm, began to make me doubt myself. Maybe he was right. I apologized to the police for making them come out. A bitter embarrassment rose in my chest. I paid Brianna, asked her to go rest, and promised I would call her if I needed her. 3 months later, I officially retired. There were no more rushed mornings getting ready for work, no endless meetings, no days racing against deadlines. The old house in Savannah became my world, but the change of pace kept me awake at night. Every night I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock ticking in the darkness. During those nights I began to notice strange sounds coming from the attic. At first they were slight noises, as if something small accidentally fell to the floor. I convinced myself it was the wind blowing through the old windows, or the wood creaking due to the changing weather. But little by little, the sounds became clearer, more vivid. I heard something like a chair scraping across the floor, slow and heavy. Then, light but constant footsteps, as if someone were walking back and forth. Sometimes I even heard the rustle of paper, as if someone were silently turning the pages of a book. I told Jerome one morning. As we had breakfast in the kitchen, I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy. "Honey, I've been hearing noises in the attic lately. It's not the wind. It sounds like someone is up there." Jerome yawned without looking up from the newspaper in his hands. He replied distractedly, "It's just rats, Simone. Our attic is old. It's full of stuff. It's mouse paradise. I'll buy some traps tomorrow, set them, and that's that." The next day, just as he promised, Jerome brought home some large metal traps, the kind that make a loud snap when they close. He placed them at the foot of the ladder, leading to the attic, right beneath the old wooden door. "There," he said, dusting off his hands. "Now you can sleep soundly, my love." Oddly, the noises disappeared completely after that. No more footsteps, no scraping chairs, no rustling paper. I sighed with relief, convincing myself that Jerome was right. Maybe it was just mice and I had worried too much. But then, strange things started happening, things impossible to ignore. One afternoon, I bought a package of spicy sausage from the local market, my favorite for its intense flavor. Jerome, on the other hand, had never liked anything spicy. He wouldn't even taste it. I carefully wrapped the sausage in paper and stored it in the refrigerator, planning to enjoy it over the weekend. The next morning, when I opened the door, I froze. A large chunk was missing. The cut was irregular, as if someone had sliced it off in a hurry. I asked Jerome, who was reading the newspaper in the living room, "Did you take some of the sausage from the refrigerator?" He looked up, frowning as if my question was absurd. I felt like trying something spicy yesterday, so I cut off a little piece," he replied distractedly. "It was good, actually." I stood motionless, unsure what to say. Jerome had never tolerated spicy food. He even complained when I cooked something with too much seasoning. But I didn't want to argue, so I just nodded and walked away. A doubt lodged in my chest. A few days later, the sausage had disappeared entirely. I rummaged through the refrigerator, checked the trash, but found no trace. This time, I didn't ask Jerome anything. An uncomfortable feeling, like a block of ice, began to settle within me. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Jerome and I drove to Charleston, South Carolina to visit some old friends. We left early in the morning and returned late at night. When we entered, the house was as silent as always. I went upstairs to the second-floor bathroom to wash my face and shake off the day's fatigue. But as I stepped inside, I felt something cold and damp. The floor was soaked. Water seeped between my sandals, icy cold. The floor was completely wet, as if someone had just taken a shower. I looked around and saw drops still sliding down the shower walls, shining under the light. My heart hammered loudly. No one had been home all day. How was this possible? I called for Jerome, my voice trembling. "Come here, please. The bathroom is soaked, like someone took a bath." He entered, looked for a moment, and shrugged. "It must have been the afternoon rain that came in through the ceiling vent, my love." I looked out the window. The street in front of the house was dry under the streetlights. "It hasn't rained, Jerome," I said, trying to sound calm. He frowned, slightly annoyed. "Then it must be a leak in the old pipes. You always worry about nothing. I'll call a plumber tomorrow." But he never called a plumber. In the following days, the bathroom floor was dry, as if nothing had happened. I checked the ventilation grate and the pipes, but everything seemed normal. Jerome's explanation, though reasonable, failed to erase the feeling of unease that was growing inside me. The noises in the attic, the disappeared sausage, the puddle of water with no apparent source. It all seemed like unconnected fragments, but when put together, they formed a contradictory image I couldn't stop thinking about. A week later, I decided to clean Jerome's study. It was his pride, a small room on the second floor with dusty oak bookshelves filled with hundreds of books and old documents. I always thought that someday we should donate some of the books we rarely read to the city library so they could reach the hands of those who needed them. That day, I stood in the middle of the room, starting to classify the books on Jerome's desk. There were piles of drafts, notes, and papers stacked chaotically, as if he never intended to organize them. When I lifted a heavy stack, my hand shook, and all the papers spilled onto the floor. The sound of the paper falling broke the silence in the room and made me jump. I bent down to pick them up, and right at that moment, a small wooden drawer that had been stuck for years sprang open with a dry click. I hesitated for an instant and looked inside the drawer. There, beneath a pile of yellowed drafts, was a small hardback notebook with a dark brown leather cover and worn corners. It looked old. It didn't seem to belong to Jerome. He always liked modern, neat things, laptops, pens, and immaculate white sheets. That notebook with the worn leather cover and a loose cord seemed to be from another era. With a mix of curiosity and dread, I took it in my trembling hands and opened the first page. Inside were pages full of handwritten letters. The calligraphy was soft, elegant, clearly a woman's. I flipped through the pages, skimming them. They were story outlines, character descriptions, plot ideas. There was a fragment that spoke of a small town on the side of a mountain where a woman lived alone, waiting for someone who would never return. Another mentioned a buried secret with details that made my skin crawl. These ideas, although distinct, had a similar air to the plots of Jerome's most famous novels, the ones that gave him his renown. My heart hammered, my throat dry. It couldn't be a coincidence. I know Jerome too well. He hates writing by hand. He always said it was slow and messy, a waste of time. Everything of his, from novel drafts to work notes to shopping lists, he did on the computer. I remember once when I asked him to jot down a restaurant address, and instead of taking the pen next to him, he turned on the computer to write it. So, whose notebook was this? A secret collaborator's? An admirer's gift? I sat in the chair with the notebook weighing heavily in my hands. Part of me wanted to show it to Jerome as soon as he returned. I wanted to hear his explanation, but I hesitated.